Never buy a home in Raleigh until you know these 7 facts. That charming 1980s home with the updated kitchen and those big oak trees out back looks absolutely perfect at first, but it can come with hidden problems: old plumbing, trees you can't remove, and a damp crawl space. And that's why before you buy anything in this market, there are 7 things that you need to know. After years in this space, these are the details that separate buyers who close with confidence from the ones who get hit with surprises later. Number 1 thing to know, the city of Oaks takes oak trees very seriously. If you know the area, you've probably noticed there's a certain kind of afternoon light that you get in our older neighborhoods, and it comes through those big oak trees. Even in July and August, it makes the heat feel a little easier to take on our hot, sultry days. That tree canopy is a big part of what makes this city feel the way that it does, and honestly, it's one of my favorite things about living here. And there's a side of it that most buyers don't see right away. So if you're looking at a lot that has 2 acres or more, or one that's split after 2005, there's a good chance part of it falls into what Raleigh calls a tree conservation area. And inside those areas, there are rules you need to know about. You can't mess with the soil, you can't pour a patio, or even store certain materials without getting approval first. And if you're thinking about adding a pool or extending the driveway, that plan can get shut down depending on where those trees sit. So even on a typical lot, there are limits. Most of the time, if a tree has a trunk that's 8 inches or more, you'll need a special permit to remove it. And if you're near one of Raleigh's champion trees, the really big ones, the rules get even tighter. And this isn't one of those things that you get a warning about. The fine starts at $1,000 for the first tree and then $100 for every inch of diameter after that. And in some cases can go up to $5,000 per tree. I once sold a house with a $200,000 view of Lake Wheeler. And we coined that phrase because the builder got fined, you guessed it, $200,000 for removal of trees without getting a permit. The buyer won, the builder lost. So cutting the wrong tree without a permit can get expensive really fast. And when we talk about commuting, I'm going to show you why driving your route before you make an offer can save you a lot of regret. Now this might sound like a headache, but it's actually a big reason Raleigh looks the way that it does. Those mature trees help keep homes cooler in the summer, and homes with strong tree coverage tend to hold value better over time. When the market shifts, those neighborhoods usually maintain stable home values. The buyers who understand this early are the ones finding the right mix. They get the trees, the character, and the flexibility to actually use the lot, which is harder to find than most people expect. So that's why having the right experienced agent helps so much. And if you're thinking about moving to Raleigh, I'd love to help you figure out what actually fits your needs. My contact information is in the description below, and many times, shockingly, I even answer my phone. The number 2 fact you need to know before you buy is that there are 1,000 of Raleigh homes with a plumbing time bomb. You open the cabinet underneath the sink and they are there. They're gray plastic pipes, matte finish, but you're viewing a home that looks completely updated and you're already in love with it. However, those pipes are polybutylene plumbing pipes, and they're still sitting in thousands of Raleigh homes that look move-in ready at first. Homes built between 1978 and 1996 usually have polybutylene plumbing, and the issue isn't just the age. Raleigh's water is treated with chlorine and other oxidizing disinfectants that over time breaks down the plastic down from inside, and you won't see it happening. The pipes can look completely fine, but when one of these lines fails, it doesn't drip. It can release hundreds of gallons in minutes, enough to flood a kitchen or soak a crawl space before anyone realizes what's going on. And this becomes even more important when you look at what's happening underneath your house. We're going to get to crawl space later, but just know that these 2 things usually are tied together. So here's where this gets serious. Insurance companies across North Carolina have started pulling back from insuring homes with polybutylene. Some won't even write a policy at all. Others will insure the home, but they won't cover water damage from those pipes, which is the exact risk that you're dealing with. So you're not just buying a plumbing issue, you're taking on a cap in homeowners insurance coverage on a particular kind of claim, and that can get expensive. And there's an upside to this. I've shown thousands of buyers how to get property insurance cover on these homes, and this is just one of the easiest things to catch during a home inspection. A good inspector will find it every single time, and once it's documented, you have leverage as a home buyer. Sellers right now have more room to negotiate than they've had in a long time, and this is one of the easiest ways to use that leverage as a home buyer. Getting a seller to cover a full repipe is a realistic outcome. So you can close on the home with the plumbing already taken care of, and that's your premium position. The buyers who miss this are the ones that walking through a beautiful 1990s home and never thinking about what's behind the walls. And you're thinking about it now, and that changes how you walk through these homes. So now when you start looking at areas outside of Raleigh, there's another factor that comes into play, and this one has nothing to do with the house itself. The number 3 fact to know is that a lot of Raleigh's outer neighborhoods are not on city sewer. In a lot of areas outside of Raleigh, you're not on city sewer. You're on septic, which means everything happens right there on your lot. And in some places like Fuquay Varina, Garner, parts of Wake Forest, this is still very common. There's no sewer line running to the street. The system is buried in your backyard and you are responsible for it. Now, if you grew up with a septic system, this is normal, no big adjustment. But if you're coming here from somewhere in the Northeast like Boston or Chicago, or the West Coast areas like San Diego or LA, this is something you want to understand early on. A well-maintained system can last anywhere from 20 to 40 years. It does need some maintenance, however. Best practices for septic tanks is to do a pump out every 3 to 5 years. Do not use a garbage disposal if you have a septic, and when you have a septic, and you are being a little bit more careful about what goes down the drain. So once you know how it works, it's manageable. The bigger concern is when it fails. A full replacement on a septic system usually lands somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000, and that's a major expense if you're not expecting it. So now there's another layer to this in parts of Wake County. Some areas sit on heavy clay soil that doesn't drain well, and if a lot hasn't already been approved for septic, getting that approval can be a challenge. And even once it is approved, there's a setback rules. Things like pools, decks, or any structure have to stay a certain distance from the septic system and from the repair area that this county requires you to leave open. If you add on an addition, do not build over the repair area, because if the septic fails, now you've got a problem and nowhere to fix it. Now, there is a clear upside here. Homes on septic systems usually sit on larger lots, more space, more privacy, and more distance from your neighbors than what you'd find in the same price point closer to the city. And the inspection side of this is straightforward. A septic inspection is one of the more affordable steps in the process, usually a few $100s. It gives you a clear read on the system's age, condition, and how much life is likely left. So don't close on a home without a septic report. That either turns into leverage during the negotiation, or it gives you real peace of mind going into a closing. Either way, you're making the decision with your eyes wide open. Now, there's another risk in Raleigh's older neighborhoods that's a lot harder to spot, and it doesn't come from the lot at all. The number 4 fact to know is that there is a flood risk here that doesn't show up on FEMA maps. So a FEMA flood map is a legal document, and it shows you the officially designated high-risk zones and it determines your insurance requirements at closing. But it doesn't tell you if the basement 2 doors down has flooded twice in the last 5 years. Those are 2 very different types of information, and only one of them is actually going to protect you. So Raleigh gets summer storms that can drop several inches of rain in under an hour. and most of the newer drainage infrastructure handles it just fine. But neighborhoods built before modern stormwater standards pre-1990s can flood in ways that never trigger a formal designation and never show up in a seller's disclosure. The Crabtree Creek and the Walnut Creek areas are two names that come up most often when I think of this. The Crabtree Valley area is especially well known locally for what happens when a big storm moves through very fast. And it's not just there. Hayes Barton, Five Points, and parts of North Raleigh are beautiful, walkable neighborhoods with a lot of character, but they also have basements and low-lying yards with histories you won't find on any listing site. And that kind of information lives in the neighborhood with the people who've actually lived there through it. And it's exactly why working with an experienced agent is so important. Someone who knows which streets flood and which don't can completely change your perspective. And if there is a flood risk, it is insurable. And you can get a separate flood policy regardless of the zone, and it's usually more affordable than people expect. A lot of our older neighborhoods have a level of character and walkability that newer built neighborhoods just can't match. And that's why homes in these areas are sought after and they sell quickly. Knowing the neighborhood at that level is what makes the difference. And that same depth is what you need for the next one. Is something I get surprised calls from new home buyers all the time. And that is fact number 5 is the homeowners association situation in newer communities is more complex than it may look. You move in on a Saturday and a few weeks later there's a letter in your mailbox, not from a neighbor, from a HOA board that you've never met, pointing to a rule in a document that you signed at closing but you didn't really read. And that's the reality in a lot of Raleigh's newer communities. And it's something you want to understand before you get the keys to your new home. A good portion of the neighborhoods built over the last couple of decades, places like Briar Creek, North Hills, and a lot of Apex and Holly Springs are part of a homeowners association. Note, they're not all the same. Some are well run, they take care of the shared spaces, they handle the common areas, and they keep the neighborhood looking good. And I've seen plenty where people barely notice the homeowners association and are perfectly happy with it. But then there are those other HOAs, and those are the HOAs where you need approval before you change your paint color, no basketball hoops in your driveway, rules about what you can park in front of your own house, and even how long your garage door can stay open. You know, monthly fees that can land anywhere from $100 to a few $100s and more, depending on the neighborhood and what it offers. And these aren't rare cases. They're written into the official documents, and once you close, they apply to you and your home. So now there's some good news. North Carolina has been pushing for serious HOA reform, and the proposals on the table would add real protections for homeowners. The changes being debated would protect current homeowners from having new rules forced on them that they never agreed to when they bought their home. HOAs would be required to respond to modification requests and within a certain set time frame, and there would be real limits on how far fines can go. Things are moving in the right direction, and it's worth knowing that there's legislation out there when you're getting ready to buy. So what this means for you is simple. I recommend that you review all of the HOA documents before you close. We ask the closing attorney to pull them for every buyer that I work with in order for them to review, so there are no surprises after you move in. And if the rules don't match how you want to live, we adjust and we look elsewhere. There are great neighborhoods across Raleigh without HOAs, and I know exactly where to find them. Reading those documents is a big part of the decision, so read them before you make an offer if there is time, but no later than through the due diligence period. And speaking of decisions people make based on weekend visits, the next one catches a lot of buyers off guard, and that's fact number 6. The I-440 commute is not what Google Maps says it is. So before you narrow your search to Cary or Morrisville based on your drive to RTP, there's something I always tell buyers to do. You pull up a Google Map version on a Saturday afternoon, You put in your office address, it may say 15 minutes, maybe less, feels easy, feels like it works and it's manageable, but that's not what it looks like on Tuesday at 7:45 a.m. in the morning. That same drive can turn into 45 minutes or more. So that stretch of I-40 slows down from about 7 to 9 in the morning, and again from around 4:30 to 6:30 in the evening. Not once in a while, this is consistent. It's one of the busiest corridors in the triangle, and it catches people off guard before everything else is checked out really well. And it catches people off guard because everything else checked out okay. The people who feel this the most are the ones who toured on the weekends, liked the area, liked the drive, and then moved in and hit their first weekday morning commute. So here's what we do instead. Before you write an offer, you test the commute during real work hours, not Sunday afternoon, but a Wednesday 8 a.m. morning drive. And that one step has completely changed the direction of a lot of buyers that I've personally worked with. We can also look at the areas where you're going against the traffic instead of with it, or places close to greenways if biking is something you'd actually use. A lot of RTP employers are hybrid now, which changes things if you're only going to work 2 to 3 days a week. The commute is one of those things you don't feel right away. It builds up over time. What felt fine on day 1 starts to wear you out by day 90. A drive you test on a Sunday is very different experience from the one that you'll test in the middle of the week. So let's get into the last issue that shows up in the inspection reports all over this market and not just in one area. And the number 7 fact to know is that crawl space moisture is Raleigh's quietest and most common problem. You know, there's a smell you notice in some homes. It's not strong or obvious, but it's there if you know what to look for. It's a little musty, kind of like an older home. A lot of buyers think it's just because the house has been closed up or it's older, but it's not. It's the crawl space, and it's telling you something you won't catch just walking through a house. Most homes in Raleigh sit on a crawl space, not a basement. And with the humidity that we experience here, especially in the summer, that space can turn into a problem if it's not managed the right way. You know, moisture comes in through the vents. The wood under the house absorbs it. Once that moisture gets too high, mold starts to grow and the structure underneath starts to break down. And this part really surprises people. About half of the air on the first floor of your home is coming from your crawl space. So whatever's going on down there, that's the air that you and your family are breathing on your main levels. So moisture also attracts pests. Termites and wood-boring insects love those conditions, and by the time you see signs inside the house, there can already be damage underneath. And now the fix for this is called encapsulation. You seal the vents, you lay down a vapor barrier and add a dehumidifier, and it turns the crawl space into a controlled part of the home instead of something that you're working against. The cost typically runs anywhere from a few $1,000s up to $15,000 or more, depending on the size of the home and the condition that it's in. It's not a small number, but it's one of the best upgrades you can make for your home. Lower energy bills, better air quality, and you're preventing bigger structural issues down the road. One thing I always recommend is to add a moisture meter check during your home inspection, and that gives you an accurate reading of what's going on, not just what it looks like. So if there's an issue, that now becomes part of our negotiation, and the seller handles it before closing or you get a credit. So once you know what to look for and how to handle it, it stops being a surprise and it becomes something that you can use to your advantage. So here's my conclusion. The buyers who get caught off guard in Raleigh are the ones who make it to closing without asking the right questions. Every one of these 7 facts can work in your favor when you know the answer up front. So if you're actively looking in the Raleigh, Cary, or anywhere in the Triangle, I help buyers go through this checklist before they ever write an offer, so you know exactly what you're stepping into. And I've got another video linked for you that breaks down 10 realities that catch a lot of buyers off guard. Thanks for watching. See you next time.